Good morning, church. First of all, credit to you for not walking out when you were handed a measuring tape when you walked in. So good for you. That'll come in handy at the end. So keep it around you, but we don't need it for a little bit. Well, my name is Travis Reynolds. So I'm the youth and family pastor here. It's good to see you. One of the things that Todd neglected to mention, there will be salad at lunch afterwards. It's not just pizza, so don't not go. If you're still New Year's resolutioning 12 days in, there's going to be salad. So honestly, that ministry is amazing. There's very few ways you can get access into public school to be able to just straight up share the gospel. I got to speak last Wednesday morning to Venice Middle School, and it was 7 a.m., and you're class full of 26 students, and you just get to share the gospel. So it's amazing. Support whatever you can by praying for him financially, and eat his food because it's already there. And I want to say by way of introduction, I'm the youth and family pastor here, and 12 days ago was the anniversary of 10 years that I've been at Grace Community Bible Church, and I feel blessed for that. Yeah. I want you to know that if you're new here, you've just been trying out our church. I mean this with all sincerity. Nobody's paying me extra to say this, but I love this church more now, 10 years in. The more I get to know the leaders and this body of believers, I love it more now than I did when we started. And that's a rare thing to be able to say about a group of people, especially in a church where politics can reign and stuff. It's just a beautiful body of believers. So thank you for being a part of this, and I love doing it. Now, a couple weeks ago, 2020 began. And right before that, there was all these lists coming out about like the best books of the decade, the best albums of the decade, movies or whatever. And it got me thinking about, man, that is a good point. I turned 40 a few months ago, and so the way I was born in 1979, so my decades go kind of by decade. And so my 30s was spent in whatever last decade is called. I don't think anybody can really agree in the last couple of decades. Isn't it nice to just we can all agree this is the 20s, we're in the 20s now, last decade, the 2010s, the teens, whatever you want to call it. You look back at those years, and I thought to myself, okay, if these are the best albums, books, whatever, the last 10 years, what was the best part of my last 10 years? And not surprisingly, like most guys I talk to, my brain was like, I don't know. It was full of detail like that. So I thought, I need to spend more time reflecting on what happened in the last 10 years. And so I kind of went year by year. I went back in my photos, because that kind of is, I got 3 kids, and so all we do is take pictures of them doing things. And you start to see, oh yeah, we did that. And there's not a whole lot of pictures of the hard stuff, but there's enough to cue you in, that's what was happening. That was the leaky roof. That was when half of our house was shut off because we couldn't live in it because of all the mold and all that stuff. So you move from year to year to year, and you start to see the faithfulness of God from point to point. And it's good to reflect on where you've been, because when the time comes that you need faith again to get through whatever that moment is, it's really, really important to remember, you know what, he was faithful here, he'll be faithful again when I have to run into that again. Because in the moment it feels like, this doesn't make any sense, I don't know what's happening. And no. You recall the faithfulness of God. This is why all throughout the Old Testament they would put up memorials, and they would pile up rocks to say, this is the place where we crossed the Jordan River. This is the place where God was faithful. And they would name wells of water that saved their lives after Abraham and his people. Over and over again, they would set up these Ebenezers, these moments to recall the faithfulness of God. We need that. If you're not there yet, go and turn to Ecclesiastes. It's if you open up the middle of your Bible, you go to Psalms. It's a couple books to your right. And Ecclesiastes is the story of an old man looking back on his life, reflecting on his life. And he's not just any guy. This is Solomon. If you know anything about your Old Testament characters, your Bible characters, Solomon is the wisest man this side of Jesus that's ever lived. He had more access to the things that we've all ever wanted than any of us ever will. And so for somebody like this to look back at their lives and assess, how did this go? What worked? What didn't work? Anytime you sit down with somebody older than you, they love giving advice. It doesn't matter how old you are. You can be a 13-year-old talking to an 8-year-old. They love giving advice. You can be an 80-year-old talking to a 60-year-old. Like, well, wait till you see what's coming. This is how it works. This is an old man speaking to younger men and women, and God is speaking through him. God is allowing his life experience to be put on the page for the sake of our benefit and the benefit of those he was writing to at the time. Now, basically, it comes down to three categories. He's asking us to destroy idols in our lives, to enjoy the life you have now, and to love God. That's the whole thing. Whatever your life is going to be, you destroy the idols that he's put in your way. Enjoy today while you've got it, and then love God with all your life. So that's where we're going to end up. Let me show you how we get there. For me, I came to this after going up to, if you were here last week, I spoke about this in communion, but I went up to my grandpa's funeral in Ohio over Christmas break. He passed away 2 days before Christmas. We left 2 days after Christmas, and we were up there for about 3.5 days and then came back. And my grandpa was 93. He lived a full life, and being able to come back from celebrating a life well lived for a long period of time to, I came back on Monday afternoon, and Tuesday morning at 7 a.m., I get in the bus with 22, 18 to 25-year-olds to head up to Passion, Atlanta, which is full of 65,000 18 to 25-year-olds. And listen, 40 years old is Venice young, but 40 years old is the highest 1% of the age bracket. It was 65,000 18 to 25-year-olds. So it's a pretty drastic juxtaposition that you go into. And what you realize is nobody there is thinking about what happens when I die. Well, probably not nobody, but there's very few. I mean, you think of yourself 18 to 25, probably not on the top things that you're really concerned about until you get the perspective of somebody who's at the end. And that's where Solomon is. Now, if you look at Ecclesiastes, we're just going to go do a survey of the book. We'll spend some time in chapters 1 and 2 and 3, and then 11 and 12, and hit a few verses in the middle. But it's really important to get this first part. First of all, Solomon, the son of David, he says in verse 1, but look at verse 2. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Not sure what the point is really of that verse, right? I mean, listen, the Bible, anytime there's repetition in the Bible, you got to pay attention. So if they mention the same word 5 times in a paragraph, you should probably pay attention to it. 5 times in one verse, you should really pay attention. Some of your Bibles are going to say meaningless instead of vanity, vapor, or smoke. All those are good. It's a hard word to nail down. The word in Hebrew is H-E-V-E-L, hevel. Hevel, everything is hevel. It's this meaningless vanity vapor. All of life is meaningless. All of this stuff, Solomon's like, all this stuff that I put my life into is meaningless. And it kind of goes like this. So I don't normally light fire at church, or on stage. I do light fire, just not on stage. Now, you'll see this is going to matter here in a little bit. Oh, there it is. Solomon was a guy who spent his life trying everything that you've ever wanted to try. There's this moment for Solomon where God shows up to him and he says, you can have whatever you want. Whatever you ask for, I'll give you. What would you like? This is right after his dad David died. He was becoming king. And Solomon tells God, he says, I don't know when to go in and when to come out. Give me wisdom to lead these people that you gave me. And God is impressed, which is a big deal to impress God. And God is so impressed, he says, you didn't ask for riches, you didn't ask for power, you asked for wisdom. Because you asked for wisdom, I'm going to give you the riches and power as well. And not just, here's a decent paycheck. The guy got paid in wagons of gold. Like, you would calculate your payment in tons of gold received. That is crazy. That's beyond comprehension. I don't know all your stories, but nobody in here is living like that. You're not rolling in with, where do I put my wagon today? Go ahead and put the wagon in the vault. We'll figure it out later. None of our stories. You're not Scrooge McDuck just swimming around. Anyways, so there's this sense that whatever you're able to buy, this guy is able to buy. And I know it's a different time period, it's 3,000 years ago, but we all wanted this, essentially the same things, and whatever was available then, he had access to. But he was also the wisest man that's ever lived, so he knew what to do with that stuff. And he had power. It was like Camelot of Israel. It was as good as it got for Israel. So people wanted a piece of his access, a piece of his power. So he had all the things that you could want. Now, the deal with life is that we essentially have two ways of learning. There's a bunch of different perspectives on this, but they all kind of boil down to one. You can learn from other people's mistakes or from your own mistakes. All of us, to some extent, have to learn the hard way. You know, if you came down here and you just sprinted into this pole, you ever have to sit behind one of these poles? Some of you right now, you're like constantly living like this. You're like, oh, I got that seat again. I'll move over here to help you out. Now it's somebody else's problem. Anyways, if you run into this pole, you're going to think that's going to hurt. And if you watch somebody else run into this pole, you think, I probably shouldn't do that. That's going to hurt super bad. And some of you are thinking, I better try that out for myself just to make sure. It's probably really hard and it's probably going to break my face. I need to find out for myself. Just because the last 12 people have broken their faces against that pole, maybe it'll be different. And that seems insane. And it is. But we do it all the time. And you've watched so many, and this is hard. Most of parenting is like, hey, don't make that mistake, I've been there. And your kid's like, whatever, you're old. You don't understand what it's like. I totally do. My face is broken. Don't do that. I care about you, and I kind of like your face, so don't break it. That's parenting, is trying to get your kids to stop making the same mistakes that you made or mistakes that we've all seen other people made. I was the youngest of 3 brothers, so I got to see my brothers make a lot of mistakes, and I happen to have a personality type that is averse to pain, and so I was like, that seems terrible. I'm not going to do that. And so some people say I live a less adventurous life, but it was less painful than my brothers. So Solomon is trying to help us understand, you don't have to learn by running your face into the pole. You can just learn because I did it. Because what you're going to find out is that all the life that you've been seeking to satisfy you is meaningless. It is vapor. That word is more accurately translated smoke. So some of you have been to, you've blown out enough candles, right? Like every year, you're more worried the smoke alarm is going to go off at birthday parties. So this might be hard to see, but I think you'll get the point. You blow these out, you can kind of see that smoke, and it looks real, but then it's gone. It's gone. That's your life. It's that vapor. It's there for a moment, then it's gone. If you were to take a picture of that, you would think, if you had never seen smoke before, and you saw that smoke, you'd be like, oh, you could grab that, right? I mean, it looks solid until you try to reach out and touch it, and it's like it's not even there, but it definitely was there. He said, this is life. All the things that you think make sense, you're like, oh yeah, I can grab onto that. You try to grab onto these things for satisfaction, and you're going to find out it's like trying to grab smoke. It just goes through your hands, and it is meaningless. And he could stop there, and most of the point of the book would be made. But he said, here's the thing, and I noticed this, anytime you go to a funeral, you probably see this, because it's for somebody you care about especially, it's such an impacting, stop your life in its tracks kind of moment, but it's hard watching the rest of the world keep moving. You know, you're in that line of cars traveling to the grave site, and somebody else is trying to pass everybody, because they got places to be, man. You're like, hey, don't you understand what's happening here? My whole life got shut down. And they're like, yeah, but mine didn't. Get out of the way. The hard thing is, and just listen to these verses 3 to 11. We got to take a deep dive into just some painful, honest truths in Ecclesiastes, but we're going to come up later. It'll be worth it. He says, verse 3, what does a man gain by all the toil under which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun goes down, and hastens back to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south, goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind. On its circuits, the wind returns. All streams run into the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, and they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing. The ear is not filled with hearing. What has been is what will be. What has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which it can be said, see, this is new? It's already been in ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among these things that come after. He's saying all of the earth just keeps on moving. The sun rises and it sets, the stream flows, but the ocean never fills. The wind circles, generation comes, generation goes, ka-chung, 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 ka-chung. It just keeps on moving. The machine of creation just keeps on chewing up every generation. And for what? So we can be remembered? I don't know, maybe, but probably not. Most of what my grandpa did won't be remembered. He was a good farmer, and there's a legacy that's there, but my kids know his name. They didn't really know him. Who's going to know us in 2120? Is there going to be like a real legacy? Maybe you'll live really large and your name will be one of those bold names in the history book that when kids are doing homework in 2120, they'll have to look up who that person was, and that'll be the answer. They can move on to playing whatever they want to play. Like maybe that's the big hope. They live large enough to be that person. You know, you go to these funerals and then it's such a strange moment because there's so much life that's happened up to that point. And yet at dinner, it's not that you don't talk about that person, but most of it's small talk about your life, about what's happening, about the playoff game this afternoon, and how good the soup is. And then you roll on because you got to get to work, because somebody was covering you while you were gone. And that person's memory fades. And so is there meaning to this? Are we just kind of grabbing at smoke? You know, he talks about all the things he sought out to fix the brokenness, and he comes to the point, you see a title over chapter or verse 12, if you have an ESV, it says the vanity of wisdom. It's summed up in verse 18. He says, for in much wisdom is much vexation. Vexation just means worry. He who increases knowledge increases sorrow. It's like knowing too much is a burden sometimes. Ignorance is bliss. You know, you start to have answers to things without the ability to change them. That's a scary place to live. Sometimes you're better off just not knowing. This is from the guy who's literally has all the answers and the power to change a lot of things, but it comes to a point where I just can't change anything else. And so when you come to that, you think, okay, what can I do? Awesome, life is meaningless. Good. How can we fix this? Here's all the things we try. Tell me if this isn't just a very thorough list of all the things we try. It sounds like this book was written last week. It was written 3,000 years ago. And look at this list, and you can fill me in if you feel like he misses something. Look at chapter 2. If you have a title over chapter 2, mine says, The Vanity of Self-Indulgence. He says, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But this also is vanity. So you think, you know what helped me feel better is feeling better. I'll do things that make me feel better. Okay, cool. But that only works for a little while, right? Like that law of diminishing returns. We're going to come back to that because that's a real thing. What about distraction? Verse 2, I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? Laughter works for a little while, right? Like it works as a distraction. But eventually, I mean, some of the most tragic figures we have who give in to their own depressions, people who try to distract themselves with laughter, they're the best at making us laugh, but their lives are tragic tales because it just can't fix the brokenness of the soul. There is a brokenness to us. Our sinful nature started us out broken, and no amount of pleasure can fix it. No amount of laughter can distract you from it. So you could numb yourself. Verse 3, I searched with my heart to cheer my body with wine. My heart still guided me with wisdom and how to lay hold of folly till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. So how about alcohol? It won't work. If you're wondering if that will work, you don't have to try it because Solomon's like, I've tried it. It doesn't work. And just, pick somebody. And one of us knows somebody whose life has just been train wrecked by an addiction to alcohol or some other addiction to a substance that you thought, maybe if I just numb, because I tried pleasure and I tried laughter and those didn't work and I don't know what to do, so maybe I can just chemically numb myself. What if you try great things, though? What if you actually do objectively good things? Verse 4, I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. Like, what if you do good things, great works? One of my struggles with humanitarian stuff isn't that they're doing bad things. Like putting wells of water where there were no wells of water is objectively good. Putting schools for kids where there have been no schools taking an education, objectively good. But if that's not ultimately to point them towards Jesus, we've prolonged a life a few decades longer before they go to an eternity without Jesus. For what? Meaningless. It is a vapor. The vapor just happened to last a little bit longer. So great works, in and of themselves, no meaning. I made myself gardens and parks. I planted them in all kinds of fruit trees. I made pools for myself in which to water the growing trees. What about nature? That works, right? You've been camping before, probably. Maybe only once because it's miserable. And some of you are like, no, I go camping in an RV, which means you just brought your house with you, and that doesn't count. So, because even when you go camping, even if it's for extended time, you eventually come home because nature is dangerous, and there's a reason why we build shelters. So that bag that you sleep in doesn't really help. And all of these, so nature isn't going to help. You're noticing he's destroying idol after idol. Oh, you think this is going to help you? You think this is going to help you? No, meaningless, pointless, ultimately fails you. They're okay in and of themselves, but if you're looking for them to calm your soul from the brokenness, it's not fixing that. So he tries more stuff. Verse 7, he tries business, the business of the time anyways. I bought male and female slaves, had slaves who were born in my house. I had great possessions and herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. He was buying property, thinking maybe that'll fix it. No, it will not. I gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. What about money? What if I had more money? What if it was 2 wagons of gold every week? No, it doesn't fix it. And believe me, some of you are like, I'd like to try that one out for myself. But even if you do, you're going to come to the same place. One of my favorite quotes for stuff like this is a quote by Jim Carrey, the actor, highly successful. And he says, I wish everybody could be rich and have everything they ever wanted so they realize that's not the answer. The interesting thing is his follow-up to that, and so I kind of I got in a weird little rabbit hole on YouTube trying to listen to interviews where he explains what he does with this reality, because once you hit this point of nothing can really satisfy me, because you see Solomon, silver and gold doesn't work. I got singers, both men and women, so music, because you couldn't get music on demand, so you had to hire singers to sing you songs. Concubines, the delight and sons of men, so maybe I'll try sex, and that'll feel good. All these things feel good for a little while, but they don't satisfy. In fact, every time you engage with them, eventually the song gets old. You feel miserable because of what you did with that person afterwards. The stuff doesn't satisfy. Listening to these interviews with Jim Carrey, the scary thing was when he came to this reality of it's all meaningless. His answer was, so you got to lean into the meaninglessness. Like, what? No. That doesn't solve anything. Leaning onto nothing, hoping it'll hold you, just lets you fall. And it sounds noble and it sounds spiritual, but it doesn't mean anything. There's no substance to it. It's grasping at smoke. You just got to lean into the meaninglessness of life. No, that just means you distract yourself with laughter. There's no amount of pleasure or distraction that can heal your soul. All these things are okay with the way they were designed. They were never designed to fix you. These things we lean on to be our saviors, the relationships, the substances, the stuff, they're all there to point you to the one who is our Savior. They were never designed to fix your heart. But we put this weight on them like they can. He even tries in verse 10, by the way, if you missed anything, he's like, whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. He's like, I tried everything. I even tried working hard, like toil. A good day's work, right? Well, good. What if you just try really hard at your job? What if you try really hard to please God? It's religion. It's the same thing. It's just meaningless because you can't fix you. Like, I am the problem. I can't fix me. I need somebody from outside of me to come in and fix this brokenness. Verse 11, he says, Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I expended doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after the wind. There was nothing to be gained under the sun. So what do you do? I mean, you keep on doing this. You skip down to verse 23. It talks about how working hard doesn't fix it. For all of his days are full of sorrow. His work is vexation and worry. Even in the night, his heart doesn't rest. This also is vanity. Have you ever worked so hard that you're so concerned about your job that you can't even sleep at night when you're supposed to be getting ready for the next workday so you can be rested, but your mind won't shut off from the day? And you're like, brain, just shut off so we can go to bed. And your brain's like, no, we got stuff to do. And it won't turn off. He's saying it's vanity. It's grasping at smoke. And you're like, yeah, great, I knew that, but I still can't shut it off. We're going to get there. Here's his following verse, piece of advice. So what do? This might be the best, or not best, the easiest sermon application for some of you and difficult for others who don't like helping yourselves. Verse 24, there is nothing better than for a person that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can even have enjoyment? So you know what you should do? You should go find something tasty to eat. That's not going to fix it, but it's nice. He's saying you have a day. Is today going okay for you? Are you healthy enough to eat some, like a full, don't eat the full half gallon of Bluebell chocolate chip, but like maybe. Maybe you just need a full-size Blizzard. They cost about the same. And you can just take something tasty. It's not going to fix you, but you know what? You can't even enjoy that without God, because once you realize that that isn't what's going to fix you, you can actually enjoy it because you're not counting on that for your ultimate sustenance for your soul. You know that if God is your salvation, ice cream is just really good. If you don't have God, you're counting on this ice cream to fix you, and when it doesn't, you just feel worse. So it can just be something that you enjoy. All this stuff of life just gets to be things that we enjoy, that God gave us as pleasure. In fact, he says in verse 26, for to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting only to give to the one who pleases God, which is vanity and striving after the wind. You see, the sinner can't even enjoy life anyways, just because of that, because you're looking to all these things to satisfy you, and they literally can't. It's not that you're not doing it right, they're just incapable. That whole list, incapable of actually helping with the brokenness of your soul. So if you came here with burdens, if you came here with something on that list that you were hoping to check off, that maybe if I can get that part right, that will fix me, it just can't. Only God can heal what's broken in you. And so you think, but what about the reality is life doesn't make sense sometimes, and I don't know what to do with that, because it seems like sometimes things are miserable, sometimes things are okay, and it's hard to tell which is which. Chapter 3, a time for everything. If you were alive in the 60s or your parents made you listen to oldies, this song probably sounds familiar. For everything there is a season and a time for everything under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, to plant and to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill, a time to heal, to break down, to build up, to weep, to laugh, to mourn, to dance, to cast away stones, gather them together. A time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. All these things, he said, everything has a time. So when you're going through the hard time, you think, this doesn't make sense. Why would God allow this? He's like, no, I let you know. There's going to be a time for that pain, because those painful moments are the times when your heart is moldable. And if you're never put in a situation that you don't understand, then you never actually have to live a moment of faith. And if you never have to live in a moment you don't understand, then you don't have to have faith in a God who does understand. And that's where you grow. That's your opportunity to grow. And it's not easy. I'm not pretending like that is. But he's just letting you know, these things are going to happen. There's going to be a time where you mourn and a time where you laugh. Both of those things are going to exist, and they're both good in their timing. And he follows it up again. This is where it's like the bottom of the hill every time. He goes, well, at least if you're going to be alive today, enjoy it, He says, verse 12, I perceive there is nothing better in chapter 3. There's nothing better for them to be joyful and do good as long as they live. Also, everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in their work, their toil. This is God's gift to man. And if you don't have this verse underlined, this was a new verse for me to just really camp out on that I haven't looked at for a while. Ecclesiastes 3:14. He says, I perceived that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. Saying, you know what? God's in control. Whatever has happened in the past, whatever happened in your 2010s, whatever happened back in the 90s, whatever is in your past, those are stories you tell now that led you to this moment. Today is the slice you're existing in right now. What are you going to do with right now? And the stories you have to tell, God already has those written out. He's sovereign. The life you have to live, that we have to live, is the day we're living in right now, the time we're living in right now. What do you do with right now? Same thing Jesus said in Matthew 6. Listen, tomorrow has enough troubles of its own. Don't worry about that. Worry about today. What do you have to do today? Like, go ahead and make plans and stuff, but live right now. We get so worried about what's to come, it messes up right now, like the moment we're currently existing in. And the comfort there is the fact that we have a God who already knows it. It's the same thing that happens with our kids, right? Because we try to let them know it's okay. It's okay, we've got this. So I'll speak for myself. Trying to get our kids to understand that going to bed at a decent time helps them tomorrow is really difficult because they want to continue playing now because they're 7 and 11 and 13. And so in that world, I just want to stay up, and you are trying to hurt me by keeping me from it. Like, no, I'm trying to help you because tomorrow is going to be miserable for you if you don't go to bed now. But once the decision is made in their mind, you're just against me. That's the problem. These rules you've put in my life are against me. Like, specifically, you genuinely are against me. You're like, you have no idea how wrong you are. I do want to go to bed, so you need to go to bed. But that's not even the point. The point is, your life is better because of these rules. It's a constant conversation I'm trying to have with my own children. Like, your life is better because, like, I'm not against you. That's not where these rules come from. I genuinely am for you. Whether you understand that or not, can you at least trust me, like, based on our past together? Can you at least trust that that's the case? And this is where God's at with us. Hey, can you trust that where we've been up to this point, I know it doesn't make sense now, but can you trust us? Because the reality is, even if he does explain it, you're still not going to understand. Like, trying to explain to your kids why you have to go they have to get the vaccine shots, it's not going to help them. They're like, I don't want to get a shot. You're like, well, let me explain it to you. See, if they inject this dead virus into you, then your body will develop an immunity, and then you won't get polio. They're not like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. All right, yeah, here you go. Go ahead. That's never a thing. Take that, put yourself in the situation. You're like, no, God, this doesn't make sense. This is objectively painful. They're going to stab me in the arm with metal. No. And God's like, will you just lay still? This is going to make sense. This is actually better for you. Like, it's not. This is where we're at. So wherever your life doesn't make sense, you have to, the same guy who wrote this is the same guy who wrote Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and don't lean on your understanding. Explicitly so, like, I'm not asking you to understand, I'm asking you to trust. You got to trust me. Whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nothing can be taken from it. He's already got it figured out. It's not that it's not going to seem unfair. It's not that you're not going to be able to make a really good argument for why it seems objectively unfair, but you have to trust in a God who is in control through it. At some point, I encourage you to sit down and read this book as a whole. Anytime you have the opportunity to read a book of the Bible in one sitting, it might take you an hour. Carve it out sometime. There's so much in here that it's just the same point from a different perspective. You got to destroy those idols. Enjoy the life you have now. And then he gets to the end about what you're supposed to do with it. Go and skip over to Ecclesiastes chapter 11. Because he makes his way through all this, and the life isn't fair parts, and about how sometimes you do good things and life hurts you. And then this Ecclesiastes chapter 11 is just one of my favorite messages to give to young adults, to high school students, to college students. But it wasn't just written to them. It's written to all of us. We don't know how much longer we've got. So I don't know if you heard Tony Evans, the preacher, his wife passed away. And he gave a sermon about this last week, and Jonathan Plummer was actually telling me about it. I want to go listen to it. But he said he had this one line in the sermon that I thought that was so good. He said, we don't have any idea what old is. You don't know how much longer you've got. If old is what happens right before you die, maybe today is the oldest I get. And so you don't wait till you get old to figure it out. But by that same token, we don't know how much longer we have. So we all have a youth that exists in us that when he's speaking to youth, don't feel like, yeah, it's not me. Too much gray to be a youth. Listen to what he says. First of all, this 11:7 is like an advertisement for Florida, so it's worth mentioning. Light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. I didn't realize what a big deal that was until I was in Ohio in December. And it was sunny and 60 degrees out, which my kids were bummed about because they really wanted to see snow. And they were just losing their minds about up there. We're like, this is a cold winter day in Florida. They're like, this is the best. Put your shorts on. And maybe, it doesn't require any measure of, wagons of gold to be able to enjoy seeing the sun. If it's a sunny day outside, enjoy it. Verse 8, if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in all of them. But let him remember the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is vanity. And then he says this, rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes, but know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. This is one of my favorite verses. When people are talking about, I just don't know how to find the will of God for my life. I don't care how old you are, because this applies to me as much at 40 as it did when somebody first taught me this when I was 22. What do you want to do? And Tony says all the time from this stage, where you are called. And until God calls you somewhere else, this is where you serve. This is where you step out in faith to do what he's called you to do. But walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes. What do your eyes see that you think, that actually looks like it would be really cool to do? I can see my life headed this direction. Then do it. Now, obviously, that's a dangerous thing to say to a bunch of 22-year-olds. What do you see that looks fun? Have at it. That's why he has to follow it up with, but know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. Don't do things that are judgeable, all right? But there's a pretty big window. I talk to kids about this when they're trying to figure out which college to go to. Well, if I go to UCF instead of FGCU, then God's going to be upset, because what if I choose the wrong thing and I end up, the rest of my life will be on the wrong trajectory, I'll be outside of the will of God. You're like, you're overthinking this. I remember being there, but here's the reality. Pick one. Which one do you want to go to? What do you want to do for a job? Where do you want to live? Trust me, if God doesn't want you there, he'll shut the door and put you back where he wants you to go. But a lot of times, God moves us through our desires. Are you trying to honor God when you make this decision? Then he's probably giving you that want to as an answer to that prayer. If that answer is sin, it's not God's answer for you. Don't do things that are judgeable. I think we're clear on that. But if you're trying to figure out God's will for your life, don't look at all those idol factories that we went through in chapter 1 and 2. Those are meaningless, grabbing smoke. But you find something that honors God, do it. And while you're at it, this is how you can tell he's talking to young men. Remove vexation from your heart. So don't, remove worrying. And then this is the part where you're like, that makes sense. And put away pain from your body, for youth and the dawn of life are vanity. It's like, will you stop hurting yourselves? Will you stop doing dumb things that hurt you? Which is why YouTube exists, basically, just to show us people failing at things they tried to do well. If you type in fails on YouTube in the search, you'll just have hours of like, what happened to my day? Because there's so many, and it's like 98% young men who are doing dumb things that hurt themselves. I don't think that was different 3,000 years ago. So he says, do you find something that you want to do? Then go pursue it. But chapter 12, verse 1, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Don't forget who made you and why he made you. And if you can remember that, you got hope. Because here's what's coming. And I think most of us have some measure of, if you've lived a decent amount of life, you have understanding of this. He says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth before the evil days come, and the years draw near of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Getting old is difficult. And old man Solomon is going to explain to you how. Now listen, these are his words and not mine, so don't get weird with me. I'm going to give you the summary because a lot of these are metaphors that are illustrating these points. Verse 2, he talks about how your eyes are going to fail and about how your brain gets fuzzy. Verse 3, with the keepers of the house tremble, your fists start to shake, the strong men are bent, your legs start to fail, the grinders cease, your teeth start to have all kinds of trouble because they are few. Those who look through the windows, your eyes start to dim. Verse 4, he says your ears stop hearing as well. You start to wake up at the sound of a bird, like, I don't know why I'm awake, but now I can't fall back asleep. And now the daughters of song are brought low. You get all cranky, like you can't just enjoy a good song anymore. Music's not like it used to be. Verse 5, they're afraid of what is high. So because you're afraid, because if you step up on something high, you could fall down and hurt yourself. And terrors are in the way. It's like the part where teenagers get scary just because they exist and you're not one. And the almond tree blossoms, all almond tree blossoms are bright white, and so your hair starts to get gray. The grasshopper drags itself along. You have to start using help to just walk along. Desire fails. I'm not going to tell you what that means. Let you interpret that for your children. Because man is going to his eternal home. He's like, all these things happen to you and then you die. And he finishes in verse 8 with vanity of vanities, all his vanities. And that was the end of his part. The guy who's writing this book on his behalf fills in verses 9 through 14. So he's trying to let you know, getting old is hard and it's difficult. So if you're not there yet, enjoy not being there yet because stuff falls apart. Did you know the point at which your body stops making as many cells as it's losing? The point at which you can no longer replenish the number of cells that are falling apart in your body? About 27. that was an audible groan. Age 27 to 30, depending on who you are. Which, if you look at the life of I like watching NFL football. Some of us are going to be watching that this afternoon. The life of an NFL running back, about 27 to 30. Like if you're Tom Brady and everybody's protecting you, you can still throw a ball at 42 apparently. But if you're a running back and you're just trying to take hits all the time, you got till about 27 to 30 before they trade Emmitt Smith and LaDainian Tomlinson. All these guys who are just stellar at their jobs, but all of a sudden they just fall off because your body can't take it anymore. And it wasn't designed to. So he's like, enjoy it while you're young, but understand there is a life of meaning that exists beyond what your body can handle. But also, if you're young, by the way, and this is true, pick somebody with gray hair and we'll tell you, hey, enjoy that. Because it's really fun being able to sprint as fast as you can without worrying about your leg blowing up. In church softball, that was like, I guess I can't sprint anymore. Anyways, so what do you do? This is what Solomon says to do. Look at verse 13 and 14 of chapter 12. The end of the matter, all has been heard. He's like, if I could sum up this whole thing, fear God, keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man. For God will bring into every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether it's good or evil. Says, you know what? Follow God. So follow his commandments, like fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man. If there's only some way we could summarize all the commandments of God, because 613 commandments seems like a lot, because this is Old Testament and he doesn't have the new covenant yet. And then Jesus is like, I got that one. Here's what happens. And in Matthew, they ask Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? Thinking they're going to trick him because there's 613. As soon as you say that one is greater than the other, now you've said that there's somehow a hierarchy of commands, but Jesus dives right in. Remember what he said? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. I'm going to give you the second one for free, he says, and love your neighbor as yourself. So you know what? All these commandments, when he says, Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. He's saying, love God, love people. If you do that, your life will have meaning. You won't be grasping at smoke. You will live a life that matters. Do you want to live a life that matters? What stories do you want told in the 20s? You want to have stories of a life that mattered. It can't all just be like Krispy Kreme and Bluebell. That's great, but it can't just be that. You got to be able to have some substance, and that comes when you genuinely love God and you love others. Because here's how it goes. If you need to destroy idols and enjoy today, you got to love God and love people. Because the backwards is also true. The only way you can really destroy those idols and enjoy today is if you love God and love people. The only thing that can help you genuinely enjoy the opportunities you have today is God. The only way you destroy those idols that you've been building up, hoping will give you satisfaction, is if you understand that God is your greater satisfaction. So what are the stories you want told about you? Now's the time for go and break out the measuring tape. You're going to want to go to the centimeter side because, I guess it depends on how long you want to live. But this will be your age. So here's what I want you to do. You don't have to show this to anybody. This is for you and your own reflection. Feel free to talk about it with your family after lunch. You go to the point at how old you are. I am 40 years old, so I tear it off at whatever age you are. So 40 years old, there it goes. Again, you don't have to show it. But the people that care already know. And then, here's the scary part. You have to tear off how long you think you're going to still be alive. When do you think you're going to die? Now listen, be optimistic. There's no reason to just be the pessimist and pick tomorrow. I'm going to go with 93. That's how old my grandpa was. Plus, this thing is really long, so it's pretty generous. It makes you feel like you're not trying too hard. Okay, do you have it? Do you have the slice of life that you have left? The years that you have left? Every one of those numbers is a potential year of your life that you have left. Isn't that crazy? In Psalm chapter 90, verse 12, it says, "Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom." Now listen, this might be what I'm expecting, but I might have this. I might have until, June. I might really only have this section right here, this little half a centimeter. We don't know how much time we have left. What do you want to be true about your life in this section? To a large extent, God gives you the privilege of choosing what that's going to look like. His will is going to be accomplished. Whether or not you get to be a part of the eternal change that happens in the world around you, He lets you be a part of that decision. So what is it that you want this to be about? I promise you, the way to make life matter beyond this is to love God and to love people. The only way to really love God is to understand that He loved us first. The reason why we have a cross is to remind us that He showed us love first. He didn't wait for us to get our lives right and then come down and save us. He came down to us. And He saved us. And if you're wondering here for your first time, like, man, I haven't been to church in forever, I don't know what this is all about. You can live a life of meaning because you trust in a God who already forgave you. And you might be bringing, like, I checked off everything on that list of the idol factories. I'm just a mess of idols. Then you lay those before Jesus, and He takes them all at once, and He says, it was in one of our songs today, and I will trade my burdens and weakness for your strength and life. And that's what we get. We get life. And 1 billion years from now, your life will still matter. And it doesn't really matter if anybody remembers this here on earth, because we will still be worshiping Jesus together with the people we have the privilege of having an impact on through eternity. So don't worry. Don't worry about the number that's left over on your measuring tape. Whatever it is, spend that life in pursuit of God in pursuit of showing people the love of God, and your life will matter. You have a chance to make your life matter, and that's how it's done. Let me pray for us. Jesus, thank you. We have nothing without you. We have no salvation. We have grasping at smoke. So whatever we've been leaning into, really hoping it'll work, we just let that go. And I pray that you would help us to let that go. And if it's anxiety, if it's addiction, if it's healthy things that have taken an unhealthy place in our heart, I pray that you would give us the strength to release to you those idols. And I pray that you help us to enjoy today. Sometimes we get so caught up in looking forward, we don't even know how to enjoy today. So give us joy in the moments we have with the people we care about. Give us friends that we can live life with. And thank you for this body. It is a privilege to serve you, and it's a privilege to love you and to show other people your love. And 1 billion years from now, when we are worshiping beside you, that will be joy. And we are thankful already. Amen. Amen.